Come in, take a seat, and join us at the table for episode 10 of Famished, a Mr. and Mrs. podcast where we talk about memorable meals, their origins, why food is so great, and more. I'm Mr. Walker Todd, and I'm joined by
Mrs. Walker Todd.
And this week, we're talking about labours of love, which was brought on by, I think, Valentine's Day, and the wonderful day we had. We had delicious steak and melted butter, and what else did we eat on Valentine's Day?
So many tasty things.
So many amazing things. But then that kind of led into this conversation about not necessarily like aphrodisiac food and that kind of stuff, more things that take a long time to make, and I guess whether they're worth it as well.
Yeah, and how food bonds you together. I think when you know someone's taken a long time to make something
on a
for
personal
you,
level, yes.
it's very magical.
Yes, I definitely have some examples of that I can certainly bring to this table today. What did you think of when we started talking about this idea? What was the first kind of dish that sprung into your mind?
The first thing that sprung into my mind, which I actually have open in a cookbook on the table now, is a amazing chocolate cake, a chocolate mousse cake, with gold dust on it from the Green and Black's cookbook.
Ooh.
And I've used that recipe so many times that it's a cookbook that when I sort of flick the pages, it will always naturally open onto that
magically,
like spread. But I used to always make it for sort of special occasions, friends, family, birthdays, partly to impress people because it always looked magnificent, tasted incredible because it's really gooey and very rich, made with dark chocolate, and the gold on the top when it sort of like crackles and you can see a bit of that chocolate moussiness underneath, just everyone sort of oohs and ahs and coos over it. But I think also it was just a way of kind of showing love, and especially giving that people that nice, warm, comforting, lovely feeling when they eat it.
Mm.
And I realised I was trying to think when I'd first made it, and I first made it in sixth form.
Who are you?
I know.
I was making like Pop-Tarts in sixth form. At best.
I know. And
who for? For family? For friends?
College friends as well.
It's so bougie.
I always do the birthday cakes. I love making birthday cakes for people.
It's because you're a nice person.
And it had replaced the recipe that I used to use, which was actually a Nigella chocolate fudge cake recipe, which was definitely a labour of love. So I'd say the dark chocolate mousse cake that's Green and Black doesn't have too many ingredients, but it does take time. But the Nigella Lawson chocolate fudge cake had 1 million ingredients in it, which made it much more challenging and long-winded to make, so this kind of replaced that. But I think in my family it's been passed down generation to generation how to bake, which I do definitely feel is sort of that sign of love being passed down generation to generation. Okay, well, if you can hear purring in the background, it's because our cats decided to come and lie on the table and purr and roll over.
He's literally he stepped on the keyboard, the computer made a beeping, I don't know what's happening. I missed the last thing you said actually, what were you just saying? So you talked about making it for your friends.
Oh, and that baking is very much, I think, a love that's been passed down from generation to generation. You know, my mum taught me to bake, my aunt taught me to bake as well, and their parents, you know, their mum taught them to bake. And I just think that sometimes that's a sign of love.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, like love language, we've talked about that on the show before.
Yeah.
But yeah, for both familial love with the how to bake and what you're making for the person. Does that lead nicely into my macaroni and cheese?
Yes, I think it does.
It was one of the, I think, first dishes I made you, probably. Like, I made like all sorts, you know, like the odd egg fried rice or whatever here. But yeah, that one was, I think it was at uni, you were hanging around at our flat, and I just decided, because I think by this point I'd already established you like cheese. That was a given.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'll go all out. So I'd gone to Waitrose and I picked all this fancy cheese, the fanciest ones that I didn't know half the cheeses were. And I think I'd found a recipe online to kind of, which is why it was like use different types of cheese. I was like, okay, cool. And then you had to make like a white sauce or a roux, I guess, of cheese. And for whatever reason, I don't know why. I still can't really explain it. But yeah, it took me about 4 hours.
Yeah, I had a nap.
Yeah, it took me so long to make macaroni and cheese that Ellie had time to have a nap. But then when you woke up, you were served macaroni and cheese. So.
And I knew, I was like,
if I'd gone all.
If he'd gone all like to all this effort and all this trouble, that he must really like me. Otherwise, why would he bother?
And also just like, yeah, I was hoping I was impressing you, but I guess at the same time, the fact it took 4 hours is maybe a bit of a concern.
I think you were impressing me in different ways. Maybe not, this isn't meant harshly, but maybe not culinary impression.
Well, I was not
like
culinarily like equipped.
Well, you weren't really into cooking.
I wasn't.
So
no, not at all. I'm still not in. The thing which comes out of thing is that you find cooking relaxing, and especially like if you create something for people, that love language element, like you're feeding your friends or your family, and they appreciate it, like that's satisfying. Whereas for me, it's just stressful. Like I've gotten better because I had to like cooking for you and cooking for like friends, but I don't get the same kind of buzz from the actual process of cooking, and I can find it quite stressful, especially if it's not something I've done before, which leads into my other main dish that sprung to mind when you talked about Labours of Love. Why are you smiling? Why?
What is it going to be?
You know what it is. It's. I think I can't find the recipe anymore. I think because it's an older one, but it's Jamie Oliver's Spitfire roast chicken, which is a whole roast chicken and Bombay potatoes.
Oh.
And
it's so delicious.
I guess to my credit, it came out well. To Jamie's credit, really, I should say, it came out perfectly.
To your credit.
But this was also, I was at my parents' house. We'd gone back to my parents, and I offered to cook for everyone. And I've never really made a meal that big, and it was just, it was so stressful. Like I still have the kind of that sinking in the pit of my stomach. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, because it was like, I think it was 10 p.m. by the time we'd finished. And that really stressed me out because no one really likes to eat late, and that was pretty rough.
I think it's partly because also you've got a different sized chicken.
Yes, because it was like just use the throw the chicken in the oven for like X hours, and I was like cool, can do that. But I didn't realise the chicken we had was like just like 0.3 kilograms heavier, but that meant it took like twice as long.
Oh my god, but guys, it was so delicious. And it was devastating because he was so upset by the whole thing.
I was miserable by the end of it.
He has never made it since, and I loved it.
I remember it tasting awesome.
It's my dream that he'll make me like a really nice Sunday roast on a Sunday, and it's just completely put him off because it basically was an Indian roast an Indian roast dinner.
It was Indian roast dinner. It was amazing. If you can find the recipe, Spitfire roast chicken, highly recommend it. It was incredible.
So good.
It's really bugged me.
Another one I was thinking of as well, which I don't think is so much a labour of love, but I think when you've showed love, is I was once in a job that was very demanding. And when I'd come home and I was really tired, we'd just moved into our flat, and so we had all this like mishmash furniture, and how you have like camping chairs and all that kind of stuff. And
we lived on a beanbag for like 3 months.
We had this beanbag, and he'd always let me sit on it because I was so tired, and it was the comfiest chair. And then he'd bring through a little pot of olives, a glass of wine, and he'd make me this pasta dish. And he'd often sort of message me, how's your day been on the way home, and check in. I think if he realised it hadn't been a good one, he'd pick up the stuff from Waitrose, and he'd get like pancetta and crisp it up and do a nice tomato sauce that he'd made on spaghetti, and just ultimate comfort food that would just make you feel like a warm hug from inside.
So what was in it? I don't even remember the dish.
It was really simple. I think you'd get like red onions, tinned tomatoes,
I think
garlic.
After previous times of cooking for you, I wanted to make it as simple as possible. Yeah, just buy good ingredients.
Cheese.
Can't go wrong with cheese, meat and pasta.
But I think it was also that knowing that you don't love cooking, the fact that you were making it for me was a show of love and affection.
Yeah, if it makes you happy, I'm all for making it again. Absolutely.
I was trying to think of other things, like...
Well, the things that we'd made.
Yeah, so I remember once for your birthday, I created the moon.
Oh, that was incredible. You put me on the moon, if anything. Like, you went so all out. Like, we had some delicious pizzas, which I'm sure you're going to get onto.
Yeah.
But beyond that, like, she strung like, she knows I like space. And she was really leaning into that this one birthday, and it was really amazing. You gave me a little space pass, like a NASA pass.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about
which is
that.
incredible. And then you made boulders or asteroids or meteors out of foil. And then you bought those like IKEA rice paper style like spherical lampshades, you know, the ones that kind of concertina out. And she painted each of them as each of the planets in the solar system. Like, so if maybe this is your 4-hour mac and cheese, like in terms of like showing, if it wasn't already clear how much you were into me or willing to pour your time and energy into something for me, that was, pretty incredible. And you strung lights up everywhere. And yeah, it was just glorious.
But the food...
And then, I didn't want to talk about the food because I presumed you were going to talk about the food. I love pizza, and she made some beautiful pizzas too.
Two homemade pizzas. I've made the dough. I think I did more of a sort of spelt dough for one, and then...
Was that at the time you were very gluten-free, weren't you? Was that
I
why?
was partly gluten-free. I think I was experimenting with different flours, but... I think if anyone's made pizza before, I feel like everyone always says, it's so simple, it's really easy to make pizza, but it does take time because you have to make the dough, let it prove, let it rest, do all of that. Then you've got to do all the toppings.
If you could make any doughs without having to wait for them to prove, I think you would. You hate the waiting of the proving.
All the time.
But I mean, we bashed out a couple of soda breads recently because it was the antithesis of a labour of love. It was just instant buttermilk.
I remember the flavour combinations on the pizza because I think I did one that was chorizo and apricot.
I don't remember apricot.
And I think it had goat's cheese on it as well.
That
it was
sounds
really
familiar.
nice. Really, really nice. And then something that we'd done together when we lived in our flat in Battersea. Just picture this. It's Christmas Eve. We're tired from wrapping. We're absolutely exhausted and laid out in our little sort of galley kitchen across every single tiny piece of workspace.
The gingerbread.
Our tiny little gingerbread snowflakes.
That took so long.
They were so small and we iced all of them.
Yeah.
And I'm not joking, some of them were sort of as big as your thumb.
A bit bigger than it's like 2-3 thumbnails across. Like.
And we'd made them so small because we'd collected all these jam jars to fill them with.
Because they were a great Christmas gift that year. Like, we didn't have a lot of money to throw around on just like buying stuff from the shop, so we thought we'd make a load of stuff. And I think it was a lovely gift.
Show everyone that we loved them, give them presents. So that was the answer.
And so you pay with your time as well as less money, more time. And in some ways that's like totally more meaningful depending on who you're gifting to, I guess.
But honestly, that was definitely a labour of love. I think I had sore fingers from using that tiny cookie cutter.
Well, didn't we add it up and we made like 1,000 or 1,500 like little
it was
stars.
mad.
Like silly amount of the tiny gingerbread snowflake things.
Yeah.
But hey, I think they were great gifts.
Everyone liked them.
Well, yeah, when you mentioned the Battersea flat, I thought you were going to talk about the French onion soup when I was sick.
Oh, yeah.
Because French onion soup can take a while, right? Or is it not actually that long of a process?
It's not that long, but it's definitely a comfort food.
Mm. Yeah, that maybe comfort food, comfort dishes that we've made is maybe a whole separate conversation.
And then the other thing I was thinking of, so when I was growing up, my mum and I used to bake together, obviously, as I just said previously, and her go-to was always flapjack.
Mm.
And then when I moved to India, to find that sort of home comfort, but also, we were all working in quite challenging conditions and all tired. So one day I said to my housemates, I'm going to make us some flapjack. And I lived with mostly New Zealanders and Americans, and they did not know what that was at all.
I mean, you get flapjack in those countries, but I guess it's different.
I guess so. So I had to go to the market, find some oats, which was actually quite challenging, and then butter and syrup. I think I had to get in a supermarket. We didn't really have a supermarket nearby, so I had to get the train, go and do all of that.
The whole thing.
And then came back and we had this really tiny kitchen. Facilities were not great, and we had this sort of weird microwave oven. So the only way I could make it was to microwave flapjack, which I'm sure many people have done. But I'd only ever made it in the oven with my mum. So then it was figuring out a way to do that. We didn't have any baking tray, so I made it in a bowl. And then just served this delicious hot mess.
Sounds incredible.
To my housemates. And they loved it. And I remember
minds.
Michelle would then regularly, when she was really tired, or particularly on a Sunday, she'd be like, Ellie, are you going to make your flapjack? And then we'd make it together.
But I thought you had all the ingredients to hand after having gone to all over
I had some left over. I bought more than one of each thing.
Smart.
Mm-hmm. And then we make it together, and I taught her how to make flapjack, and it's still something she mentions to this day.
So you created a new comfort food for her, like list of comfort foods. That's amazing.
Yeah.
The fact you went far and wide to get the bits to make it as well is.
But I think baking has always been the labour of love.
For you personally.
Yeah, and I think.
Whereas me, any cooking is the labour of love. Labour of something.
And I think my most recent cookbook, which is the Ottolenghi Sweet
Oh, it's
book,
very good. But...
my goodness, anything you make out of that is a labour of love.
So get 27 ingredients.
Yes, I was going to say 50 ingredients. But I often use it as a go-to to at least get the flavour combinations and maybe the basic recipe and then tweak it.
Yeah, and also just look at the pictures because they're really good.
Really good.
You did actually remind me, talking about sweets or sweet, desserts, did remind me of my older brother Luke. He used to, babysit me sometimes. I don't know, up until I was probably into my teens, I guess. And sometimes if it was evenings, that would mean he would have to cook or make food or whatever. And I remember once, I think we were watching movies or whatever, and he's like, "I'm going to make you a special dessert." And I was like, "Okay." And I didn't really know what he had in mind. And he brought in a slice of Mars bar, right? The British Mars bar, not the American style Mars bar, if that's not clear. And it was about an inch long, so just almost like the end of a Mars bar, just a single slice. And before he brought it in, he was like, "This is basically you can only have one of these in your life because they're so bad for you." Which, as a kid, you're you take that seriously. Okay, I'd never forgotten it. It's weird. I was thinking about it the other day, actually, unrelated to FAMISHED. And I think he'd put chocolate chips on it, and he'd put chocolate sauce and chocolate syrup on it, and I think he'd done something else to it as well. So it was super sugar-tastic, diabetes city.
Amazing.
Despite just being one slice of a Mars bar, not even a lot of chocolate.
But he'd gone to all that effort to pimp out that one small piece of Mars bar.
And it looked very for 11-year-old me, it looked like a fancy thing because it was when high-end restaurant plating, it's a tiny amount of food on a huge plate. It was that kind of logic.
Only your brother could do something.
I loved it though. I've never forgotten it. No. Clearly it was a thing. I think he was just having a fun time in the kitchen, really. Whilst mum and dad were at the house, he could use all the sweets and sugary stuff and just make whatever he wanted, and then just feed it to his little brother and see what happens.
Brilliant.
But,
bounce off the walls.
Yeah, I love that. That was really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that one popped in my head just out of your flapjack conversation.
Another thing I was sort of trying to think of that wasn't just for you or for my mum. Yeah. Something more savoury as well, because most of my stuff is sweet.
Yeah.
A friend of mine, we call her Fussy Fish.
She knows who she is. I have a list on my phone called the Fussy Fish list, and it is all of these things of specifics of what she does and doesn't eat, and it's not there's allergies here. No, it's red pesto's okay, but not green pesto.
No, she likes green pesto now.
I can't even remember. I need to look at the list. We'll discuss that in a whole other episode. One time.
We'll have to get her on the show.
Yeah.
But because she's quite picky about what she likes, in particular, she absolutely loves mushrooms, halloumi, most forms of melted cheese. So
she's smart.
One of her go-tos is mushroom risotto.
Oh, yeah.
And over the years, I've tried to find... So whenever she's coming round, I actually really look forward to it because I think it's a chance for me to sort of flex my creative muscles, but with a small brief.
Yeah, sure.
I've got mushrooms and cheese to work with. And because I genuinely find cooking joyful and a form of sort of expression and creativity, I go down to the supermarket and I'll be like, right, what interesting mushrooms can I get? What cheese can I get? Maybe some herbs. And I always try to create slightly different versions. I think I've done your sort of classic mushroom risotto. I've added thyme. I've added other herbs. So I think I've done rosemary before. And then I remember this one dish I made her, which was mushrooms all laid out in a baking tray, all different sizes and shapes and different textures and deliciousness, with great big torn off chunks of mozzarella dotted in between it, fresh thyme pulled off the stalks and sprinkled over, a few cloves of garlic, drizzled with really nice olive oil, baked. And I served her that, and I don't remember what I served it with, but she was like, "Oh my God, you have to make this every single time I come." But I think cooking for her has very much been a labour of love. One, because obviously I love her very much. She's a dear, dear friend.
But also she challenges you to thread the needle.
Yeah.
Also, I should ask, why have I never been fed this? This sounds incredible.
Because you're not a fussy fish.
So
you just get fed whatever.
The other nice that you don't really make bad food. It's not in your nature or your ability to.
Well, I didn't like that chicken tagine I made this week.
Oh yeah, you get
But
funny about like overcooking chicken, even though I just think it's been slow cooked and it's amazing and it falls apart deliciously. You're like, no, it's overcooked. Terrible.
It's terrible. And then another thing which you'll remember, in one very hot summer, we were in his auntie's flat.
Yeah.
Hunched over a dining room table for many hours.
You remember the sunflowers?
Making sunflowers out of icing sugar.
Yeah, making a friend of yours' wedding cake, which is like no pressure considering you never made frickin' anything iced, anything ever.
No, I think because they knew I loved to make cakes, they were like, "Would you mind making our wedding cake?" And I was like,
Sure.
Okay. And they said they loved the idea of sunflowers. They just wanted a simple cake. And we proceeded, we did loads of baking and taste testing of icings because I wanted to put blueberries in the cake, but I didn't want them to sink in the sponge. So to work out how to do that and then do a nice icing that complemented it and then make all of these beautiful sugar sunflowers that dotted all over this like tiered cake. And it went down a storm.
I mean, we used like tools for sculpting these things that I never knew they even existed.
His auntie's really into sugar work, so she's
amazing at like, especially flowers. She can nail flowers.
But it was so funny because I tried to sort of make like thin layers of cake with icing, and by the time it actually got to people eating it, was sort of became a bit of a leaning tower of Pisa and like trying to cut slices. There was no cutlery, so I think that they thought they were going to be able to eat it with just a napkin, and it was all sticky. I mean, it was delicious.
Also, when you were supposed to be the one cutting it as well, like once they'd done the first ceremonial cut, you were then the one who was like in charge of dicing it up.
Which I almost didn't want to be.
Well, there's a whole art form to cutting up a cake for a wedding.
So yeah, that was another labour. But yeah, I think it was all day making these sunflower. Sugar sunflowers. It was fun.
Yeah, it was nice.
I don't think I'd rush to make a wedding cake again, or if I did, I'd make it very differently.
I mean, you hear about these people who make their own wedding cakes. It's nuts.
So much stress.
But we were very thankful for my auntie Andy for making our wedding cakes too.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, and she did like mad crazy flavours, which we'd asked for, which is incredible. Got any more personal anecdotes of labours of love in your little notebook there?
No, the only other thing I'd sort of thought about is, which I think you mentioned at the beginning, people's reactions.
Well, how do you
mean? To your labours of love, what you've made.
Oh, well, yeah, like it says a lot, doesn't it? Like, especially like, for instance, the macaroni and cheese was out of character for me. If I was feeding myself, I would never spend that much time making a dish.
I think it's the man to our relationship.
Yeah. And I've fed you cheese in various forms ever since. Yes. Namely on pasta, actually, yeah. So,
and I love it.
Yeah, apt. So, yeah. Yeah, labours of love in that regard is, it's important.
I remember I made you 2 birthday cakes one year because I couldn't decide which one to make, so
I love that that's your solution to the problem.
I know. And it was for a party, and I remember saying to one of my girlfriends...
Is this the birthday?
No, this was at your parents' house. Oh. I remember saying to one of my girlfriends, "Oh, what do you think of the cakes?" Like, excitedly, because most of the time people are really nice about my cakes. And she just turned around and she said, "Oh, I love this one, but this one's a little bit dry."
Is that?
Livid.
Who was that? Not to
name names. You're mouthing names. No.
Oh, okay. You'll never know who I whispered.
You'll never know. I was livid, but also a little bit hurt.
Yeah, for sure.
We're not actually friends anymore. I think that says a lot.
Oh, this is like the peanut butter cookies I made that one time.
Oh, yeah. You see?
Yeah, I took them to work, and then like a work colleague, she was like, they're okay. It was like my first time trying to bake off like my own steam.
I know, I was so upset. He came home and he told me, and I was like, ignore her, don't stop baking. So yeah, absolutely livid. But it's funny how people put their sort of It's funny how people put their opinion in that way, and that's fine. It's okay if people don't like what you've made.
Yeah, for sure.
But
is it
how sensitive that you are about that, because you've really tried.
Because it's obviously it's reflective of how much effort you think you put in, and also I think the expectation, like if you think that they're gonna love this, and then they're just like, oh, that's right, it's a little bit dry, soul crushing,
punch them in the face.
Punch them in the face.
It's true, but I think those are most of my examples. They were kind of what came to my head of things that I've made, we've made, other people have made.
Yeah. I like it's a mix. I thought it was all going to be just cheese or sugar, but it's actually a nice blend of the two. I was also looking up, in terms of just like labours of love, not explicitly things that we'd made, but things that out in the world you can find that take time to make or prepare or whatever. The thing that first popped into my head, I couldn't remember the name of it, but I'd seen it. I'd seen a video of it in some sort of travel cooking show. It's called funazushi.
Oh.
So the end of that word, you can kind of hear the sushi name in there.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like sushi, but sushi is all about fresh fish, right? Funazushi is intentionally at like a year to several years old. So it's a carp, a type of, is it crucian carp, which I think you can fish in Japan quite readily. And then they put the whole fish in, they stuff the fish head with rice, and then they put it in a bucket with rice in the bottom of the bucket, and then you layer it, so you have like fish, rice, and you put a stone on top, close the bucket up, and then you don't refrigerate, you just leave it for like a year.
So it's a rotten bin of fish?
Pretty much, right?
A bin of rotten fish.
Yeah, it'll work both ways. And the rice produces, as the rice ferments, it produces lactic acid, which breaks down and like preserves the fish.
I'm shaking my head in disgust. That
Yeah. It's like a thing from a specific part of Japan.
How weird that's what you like found and sort of thought of, because I thought of, I remember years ago I saw this cooking show.
Yeah.
And they showed like in the back of goodness knows where in Italy, like this beautiful village where this famous cheese comes from, and it's a maggot cheese.
Oh, I've seen this. This is not what I've got, but I have another Italian cheese to talk about.
You have to wait for the maggots to eat their way through the cheese, and the maggots still need to be alive. They can't be dead, and all this kind of stuff. And it
can only be sold in certain places as well, if I remember correctly, right?
Yeah, it's called kasu matsu. And it literally translates as rotten cheese.
Yum yum.
And it's seen as a real delicacy. But, I mean, what a labour of love. The cheese, you have to fill it with the larvae. You have to wait for it to progress, wait for it to ferment, and then you enjoy it with some delicious homemade bread.
It's like that civet coffee.
I feel like I would try it, but also be scared.
Yeah, I think especially if the maggots are just hanging out in there. I'm not sure about that.
No.
Grim. But on the cheese front, you remind me, so like a famously old cheese is like Parmigiano, is it Reggiano or whatever?
Yeah.
Which is like 18 to 36 months. There's this like cow-goat blend called Bito Storico. And the pronunciation I just said is probably awful. But it can be up to 18 years old.
What?
And they found older cheeses, but like, this is a cheese that you can buy. I think the ones you can buy are about up to, was it 12 years old? Something like that.
Does it cost a bomb?
Yeah, one of the oldest ever was sold in China. 15-year-old wheel of this cheese cost $6,400.
Why am I not surprised it's in China?
China, they do crazy stuff. There's a whole cultural thing of buying expensive white and red wine and just adding lemonade and Coke to it. Yeah, it's like a whole
And the giant
thing.
Strawberries.
Oh yeah, isn't that Japan? Or is
that Japan?
I think it's Japan.
Oh, that's Japan.
But there's something about, actually, we've seen that guy who specialised in strawberries in Japan.
Yeah. And
he dedicated his life to making like the most beautiful sweet. But then the prices were like, it was like $100 for a strawberry.
No, it was like $300.
It was mad.
It was mad.
But game changing. But yeah, this cheese, it sounded incredible. I want to try it. It's a 10 to 20% blend of the special goat's milk along with the cheese, the cow's milk. Sorry, and this goat is only in like one valley in Italy, and apparently like the type of grass that the cows graze on affects the wheels from year to year, so it's like a whole thing. But yeah, so there's 18-year-old goats and cows cheese, there's multi-year-old, like 2 to 3-year-old fermented fish in Japan, and then there's also this other thing I found in my research was this Russian spiced meat dish called buzenina, which takes 15 hours to make. So it's not a long process to like make the thing in the first place, but the actual cooking and prepping of it, 15 hours long, and it just sounded really nice.
Well, if you also think back to like back in the day how wine was made, like all of the grapes had to be stamped on by hand.
You were talking about this earlier, yeah.
You know,
but by foot.
By foot. And I remember once going to visit a friend who lived in Cheddar Gorge and thinking, I had no idea that cheddar took this long to process. And
I mean, he has got a very small brain.
Oh.
Cheddar's sitting basically on the microphone right now as we record this because he doesn't want to be left out. And yeah.
He doesn't.
Not a thing going on in that little head of yours, is there, buddy?
But yeah, many labours of love. I think it'd be really nice to know from you guys, what have you made that's taken a long time? Or, send us some photos or tag us on Instagram.
Stuff you've made
Twitter.
Or stuff you've ordered or bought, like any of that. And also, Ellie, if you wanted one of the labours of love that I've made you in the past to be repeated, I think I can guess, but what would you want if I was to make it again, do you think?
It'd be really difficult between the mac and cheese and the Indian roast.
I mean, they are the two, right?
I think I'm going to go Indian roast.
I mean, I love that you.
Because I love making cheese sauce.
Of the two, the flavours and like the actual like finished product, that sticks in my head way more.
Yeah.
Like I don't remember much of the.
What about the other way around?
I mean, anything you make is good. So I don't really have like. There's nothing I would be like, I specifically wanted to make this again. I love it when you make me like a pizza is real because I love pizza. So that's pretty great. But yeah.
So you're going to make me an Indian roast dinner again, and I'll make you a pizza.
Someone gets the raw
Deal, shake on it now.
No.
Shake on it now. He won't even give me his hand, guys. Oh, he's done it!
I'm shaking it.
Yes.
We'll do a famished bites or something about the taste test. Yeah, God, at some point. And I'm not going to commit to that anytime soon, though.
No.
But thank you, everyone, for joining in. This is a fun one. Yeah,
I loved it.
We had a little pause, I think, post... Valentine's, and Feb's a busy month for us. We've got like nieces and family members' birthdays and all sorts going on. But thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed the show, do let us know about what we said about your own labours of love. And if you feel so inclined, you could even leave us a review about the show, about the episodes. You can hit us up at Famished Family on Twitter and Instagram. Reviews are best left on Apple Podcasts, but any podcasting app of choice works for us. And I think that's it for this week. So I've been Mr. Walker Todd.
And I've been Mrs. Walker Todd. Thanks for joining us at the Famished table. And don't forget, always leave room for more.